I have to tell you, though, as someone who's often the target of this kind of vicious speculation, I was outraged. Come on, it's a joke. It's a total joke.
Scott.
And let me just ask you one question. If you're so offended by this, where was the offense at the Democrat convention when former President Barack Obama himself at the podium made his own junk joke at the podium? I didn't hear anybody offended about that, and now we're offended about this? Come on.
Here's why. And actually, the thing is, I don't think people are even offended. They're just like, oh, there goes Donald again. We thought maybe he could focus on policy, complete a speech, actually talk about. But it's like it goes back to the same shtick. And what was funny about the Obama joke, A, it was actually funny, and
it's
B,
okay when he does
it was
it.
unusual.
Yeah, it's funny when he does it.
It was unusual that he did it. This is par for the course for Donald Trump. You have
is that a golf pun?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
I'm so glad you picked up on that. The fact that we are, 2 weeks out before an election, every vote counts, people talk about the economy, all these issues, and you have all of these Republican strategists saying, Donald, please just stay on message. Actually, just complete a speech, and this is how he chooses to spend his time. Well, it's not changing any voters, right? People will find the joke funny or not.
No,
right?
I think you're watching a clip. You're watching a 10-second clip of what was an hour-and-a-half speech where he was talking about the economy. He was talking about the world being on fire. He was talking about Iran.
He also decided to go on his rant about insulting Kamala Harris's intelligence. And again, I'm not sure that when you're talking about the swath of women voters who are still, in theory, up for grabs, that continuing to call a woman stupid, calling her names, is an effective way to get that vote.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
I also, just for the record, what Obama said, which had actually, he never said anything.
He literally did the hands.
He didn't use any words.
He said, we know
Donald Trump was talking about Arnold Palmer naked in a shower. And the way that other...
naked. You say when he gets out of the shower, everybody
that's
was
right, because you're fully clothed coming out of the shower.
So look, at the end of the day,
I
don't think anybody except this show...
it's very clear that's what he was talking about.
I don't think anybody of this show is really that concerned about it. No one back in Florida is talking about it. And I got to tell you, when we're on the verge of a major war in the Middle East, again, when we had a leak come out of this administration that essentially threw Israel under the bus, clearly in favor of Iran, I agree with you. I actually agree with you. There's a lot of other things we could be talking about.
This joke didn't change a single vote. I mean, like his people liked it. The people that don't like him didn't like it. To me, there are more important things that he could be talking about that we should be talking about.
Let me play what Vice President Harris said about it.
In many, many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of him being president of the United States are brutally serious. There are things that he says that will be the subject of skits and laughter and jokes. But words have meaning coming from someone who aspires to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. These are the things that are at stake.
Abby, the scolding from Kamala Harris, who's upset because her opponent has a sense of humor. This is what we're in for the next 4 years. I agree with her, by the way. Words do have meaning. Everybody's words except for hers, because what she said when she ran for president before apparently have no meaning based on the kind of campaign she's running now. If you can't take a joke, make a joke, laugh a little on the campaign trail, I don't think the American people are in for scolding right now.
It's a joke to you, but I do think that the through line of a lot of the conversations that we have are about how does this actually land on the ears of women. And I've talked to a lot of women voters who do not like that. They feel like when Donald Trump is on TV, they cannot turn up the volume when their kids are around. Like I mean, maybe that doesn't change a vote, but there are a lot of people in this country who feel that way.
Well, and it's also to what
they may feel that way for a second, or they may feel that way, but you know what they do right after that? They go to the gas station. They go to the grocery store. They feel incredibly insecure with I think we could all agree now, crime is rising. Now that the FBI has kind of redone the statistics with the insecurity that we feel around the world. And once again, we're talking about what President Trump said, but what people are feeling right now is what he did and then what hasn't been done since then.
Yeah, let's talk about how women feel insecure and how women feel in this moment, right? Can't go to the hospital and expect that my healthcare needs or reproductive needs will be met in a medical way. They'll have to be dealt with a legal way.
Are women,
Number two,
because they feel insecure.
And who are they feeling threatened by?
criminals that are being let out of
Let's be
jail.
clear. This idea that it's
Again
a
and
joke. If you
again.
can't take a joke, you should just be okay with it if you can't take a joke, right? So many challenges that women have in the workplace, in social settings, are dismissed as you can't take a joke. The entire point of the 1960s movement forward was to have women seen as equal, to be able to compete on an equal playing field, and to diminish our safety and security or our opinions about whether or not we think something is appropriate for our children as a joke. I think it's part of the
Why is this
demeaning,
anti-woman?
the demeaning
What did he
aspect of Donald Trump.
What did he say about women? He talked about Arnold Palmer. What did he say
In
about
that
women?
same speech, he continued to insult Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney for their intelligence. They're stupid. J.D. Vance went on a rant as that. It is a consistent theme for these two men that when women in opposition, the thing that they come up with is insulting them for their intelligence. That's it. Nothing else on policy.
So you're connecting that to the Arnold Palmer side. I don't know that anyone else in
I'm
America
connecting it
is connecting.
not to your. In
really a
2 minutes ago, saying you should just be able to take a joke. You can't take a joke. Oh, that's your problem.
I didn't say it was your problem. I said it's a problem that if somebody can't take a joke and wants to turn this into the biggest issue in the election, that's a political problem.
I don't think
that you all
anybody's
have.
turning this into the biggest issue in the election. It is, though, emblematic of who Donald Trump is. And to your point, nothing new here. He's been telling all kinds of jokes on the campaign trail for years now.